Who some may describe it as a bold members' bill to remove DEI regulations from the public service and to tackle growing concerns around ideological gatekeeping and wokeness in government appointments. The members' bill is from New Zealand First. Joining us again to talk about this and maybe a few other things, Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Affairs Minister, Leader of New Zealand First, Winston Peters. Thanks for coming back on RCR, Winston.
No, thank you. And thanks for discussing a very serious subject, which those who are its architects don't want you to know about.
We were talking about the Midwifery Council just a few days ago, and it came up that the change in language for practice in midwifery, removing, specific references to biological gender, etc., was being done to honour Te Tiriti. Is there any connection between multiple genders and raising women and, the fact that they're the ones who are pregnant and are being cared for? Any connection with that and Te Tiriti?
Remember the ancient saying that those that the gods would destroy, they first make mad. And this is what's going on here. You've got people denying that the very role they've got to deliver, that is delivering babies from women, is contaminated now by those who are saying, but you can't call yourselves that, we don't want to offend anybody. We'll imagine that you're going to deliver a baby from someone who's got a penis. This is how extraordinary, ridiculous it's become. And we're paying for it.
This has been a slow creep, but it seems to have infested virtually every layer, even the politician layer.
Well, you're quite right. What happens is that when you get this sort of, types of social engineering, where you've got the bank role to ensure that you get your purpose, whether it's agreed, whether you've got any mandate, whether you've been to an election, whether you've asked the people or not. When you've got that sort of power, then many people are forced to oblige, or they lose their job, or they lose promotion, or they get sidelined. And then you get sort of unconscious things like judgments called unconscious bias. Well, you know something? Everybody's got unconscious bias. It's part of being a human being as you're conditioned and grown up. Some people don't like cabbages. Some people don't like carrots. We're told they're good for you, but the unconscious bias is when you're young, you might not have liked it. Well, this is the way life is. But no, these people are such social engineers. They think they can override that and end up with a purpose at the end that is not merit-based, but sort of it's about equity and diversity, whatever that might mean.
Do you think people really believe in this, or in the realm that we're talking about here, and you mentioned it just before, people are worried about losing jobs, etc., but people are also opportunistic about gaining positions and moving up the ladder and do things, particular things to create those opportunities for them. Have you done any thinking about what's driving some of these so-called ideologues?
What's driving them, that basically are thinking is fascist in the extreme. They don't want elections. They don't want public discussion. They don't want it out in front of the public. And when they're discovered, they plead an innocent purpose. And all we're trying to do is ensure that everybody gets their help up. But no, that's not that's happening. What's worse of all, for many of us who are in their so-called set, such as Pacifica, Maori, or dare I say it, women, what they're really saying is you can't make it unless you get our help. That is a form of inverse racism in the stream, and some of us detest it because what they're saying is, without me, you will not be equal. Now, do you remember the great program that was in America called The Eyes on the Prize about the civil rights movement? Well, they didn't want parallel institutions. They didn't want to set up black institutions. They wanted to bust down the access to the white institutions. That's where all the best learning was, and they want to be part of America's best. They went on to have a black president. That's the progress they made. But no, over here we got duality being put up as the answer. Is it discussed? Do they campaign on? Do they ask the public? Never ask the public, because they think the public is too unaware and too ignorant to make these important decisions. They are fascists in that sense.
And why is the public unaware?
Well, the public is unaware because many people should be kept alerting the public, namely you, right here, right now, in your calling, should be alerting the public so that you hear, as that famous British singer saying, you got to hear both sides of the story, but you're not. I just was on Morning Report. She chipped every question that she asked me, even though I was halfway through the answer, and then following me is somebody on her side of the argument never tipped her once. She let her give all her explanations in a foreign voice, I might add. This is somebody who's not a New Zealander born like I am. And they have some funny to think that that's called a fair go. Paid for, of course, by you and I, the taxpayer.
Well, how long can that go on?
Well, it's not going to go on for too much longer, I'll tell you what, because in fact, people are leaving in their droves. I could have told you, but on X right at the moment, on this very matter, we're passing 100,000. What's their listenership at the moment? Massive decline. But the arrogance doesn't stop them from carrying on that simple way.
I don't think they're even on X.
Well, guess why? Because nobody's on would be other than criticism, and then people just peter out and just go somewhere else. On X, the support is 95 to 1, maybe 98 to 99 to 1.
The purpose of the members' bill to remove DEI from the public service, how's that going to work? How could it work?
Well,
and will it get results?
Well, we're saying to our coalition partners, this is something that we campaigned on in the heat of the campaign. We packed the polls and we mentioned these matters. We saw what was emerging in 21, 22, 23. The architect of it is the leader of the Labour Party.
Who's polling as most preferred Prime Minister?
Look, if I was polling as most preferred Prime Minister, leading a Labour Party, where the polls are actually saying that about 40% of my party members don't think I should be the Prime Minister, I'd be worried.
Okay.
Because, I mean, he's on about 20-something, and there he's meant to be on 33 or 34. And it means that 1 out of 3 voters are saying, you're not up to the job. Now, that's what his own party is saying. So if I was, I wouldn't be boasting. Let me tell you that I once was on 38% in the polls and I was only a backbencher. I'm not boasting about it, but I'm saying, please learn to understand that as some of the media, these polls are so dysfunctional. In that poll, that had me on 8.6% as preferred Prime Minister. Now, look, we're just on the way. We're on the rise at the moment, and they're not going to be stopping us. It'll be inexorable.
How do you undo, though, this DEI? Well, it's a bit of a catastrophe, really, isn't it? It's warping the normality that, I'm sounding so quaint here, we used to know and rely on, right?
Well, you know, they're more and more important. They're denying it exists. This is the appendices for the public, for the Public Service Commission. This is the background of the Act. It's all here. All this stuff here references it, and there I'm on a program, and she's denying it exists. This is the pages of this and in Internal Affairs. And now they've got monitoring updates as to how they're going. This is all discoverable. That's what they're paying to do. We've got taxpayers' money going into their research, and they're sitting there and denying it exists.
The Prime Minister has now said that the government is reviewing the Public Sector Act and may pick up and include some of the suggestions in your bill. Do you have any information about the types of things I think Minister Collins, in this case, will be looking at in her review? Will they go all the way? Do they realise that this is even an issue?
I don't think it's fair that they did realise it was an issue until they looked at it closely, and they haven't got around to doing that. We have. And we looked at it closely, but we had people coming to us, all sorts of people who were brassed off at this. And most particularly, the most profound one I had was a couple that said, look, my husband went through law school, med school before me, 3 years before me. We're on the same sort of academic transfer, same intellect, so to speak, same sort of marks. And we want to both go on for earlier learning. I'm 3 years after med school. I got in because I'm a woman. He got told, "Look, sorry, you're not a Polynesian, not a Maori, not a woman. So we've got our priorities here. We've got to have our so-called quota." And so in the end, these two, I'm sad to say, comes from an extraordinarily bright family. Said, "Actually, we've had enough of that. We're going to go overseas and finish our advanced health medical specialist training. We don't think that we want to live in a country that thinks that way, and that's a tragedy, and that's writ large."
Okay, so your colleagues are aware.
We are going to put together all the information to make sure they are aware, and we're going to go on campaigning on it. You know, something, the paradox is they're blaming me for being Trump-like. Well, Donald Trump never thought of this. We were campaigning on this a long way out, and Donald Trump never got elected and never got into the White House until the 20th of January this year. And we were out there for months and months filling halls saying this. So they make the cheap allegation. Oh, you're doing what Trump said. Well, maybe Trump's heard about it and thinks, well, actually, there's not a bad country. You only got some common sense after all.
All right. Is it good enough to rely on chief executives of government departments to review and replace, what we're talking about, or are they a problem as well?
Well, the chief executive is always accountable to the political system in the end, as the prime minister is. We're all accountable. And so if they're doing their job properly and it's fair and it's proper, then the inquiry by Parliament, the transparency and the accountability will exist, and they'll perform and they'll do a very good job. Now, look, no one's not saying that people shouldn't get a hand up. They shouldn't get on the basis of something exclusive about their ethnic or gender background, or worse still, the church they believe in. Now, we're a country that's famous for this egalitarian society. We're a world leader, unbelievably, more than any other country, a world leader, and we're slipping here badly.
It's an interesting point you just raised there in terms of religion. Many people feel that Christianity is under attack. Do you get that impression?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I've frequently said, in a long career at meetings, the Judeo-Christian background to our form of society and to our form of laws, to our liberty and our freedoms has been critical. Please make a stand for it. There's something to be awfully proud about it, because the blossom or the flower of democracy in the thousands of years of humanity is a very rare thing. We've got to make a stand and defend it.
If there is slow walking or dragging of feet on, I guess, recovering to what we had not too long ago, DEI, will you be firing people? Will people lose their positions if they aren't on board?
Well, the answer is, if you're carrying on something that's undemocratic, unfair, unjustified, and for which you've got no mandate, yes, you should be fired.
Right. And how can you measure the outcome? I guess that's a slow process too, isn't it, potentially?
Well, you can measure the outcome by actually having a proper policy of choosing people on merit. Now, if, for example, there is something in the job that needs a diversity by way of understanding, then that'll be an automatic criteria, but it's still coming on merit. If I'm, for example, going to be dealing with something, how shall I say with this without getting it wrong? If it's clear to me that a woman can do that job far better than a man because of their particular unique skills, then it is not prejudice if they get the job before me. But I'm not choosing the thing on the basis of the gender. I'm choosing on the basis of talent, skill, and merit.
Here's the big question. How much is this all costing us? We've seen the Doge effort in the US. We've found out that Health New Zealand are working on a Excel spreadsheet controlling $27 billion. That sounds pretty loose to the average person. How much money is being evaporated through this sort of culture? Do we know?
Well, the waste is colossal. The waste is colossal, but, it ends up with these sorts of things. When that is permitted in a political system, we end up spending $54 million on the cycleway proposal over the Auckland Harbour Bridge. How could you possibly spend $54 million on something that doesn't go ahead? How could you spend so much money on light rail when it didn't go ahead? Just hundreds and hundreds of millions. And, or for example, Three Waters, which never got started. This is the kind of thing where when you look at it, you think, actually, if I was a total spendthrift, I couldn't spend the money that fast.
Is this a laundering system, maybe?
Well, it leads to that view. And, something as they're finding in the United States, when they look, they're uncovering colossal waste and hidden money, misuse of money.
All right. So members' bill has to be pulled from a ballot. Have I got that
It's
right?
going to be pulled from a ballot, but if people have a new experience, they become overcome with common sense, they might just start to adopt it when they're doing the public service review, which Judith Collins is doing right here, right now. But I'm certain of my evidence. I've got all the details and how many references. All these yellow highlights on these pages are references. I might add, they're in the appendices, they're in internal affairs. They've got also yearly reviews of how they're going and open confessions. We're not doing too much here. Maybe we got it wrong. So these little group, handpicked by themselves, never got a mandate, never got any authority, are out there running the society as they please. That's fascism.
Do they think they're the masters of the universe? Because
Yes,
they're
they
just
do.
public service employees in the end, aren't they?
Well, you know the beady-eyed look sometimes you get at a restaurant when something comes up and their view is different to yours. It is a malignant, beady-eyed view that somehow you're a retard who doesn't understand society in the way that they uniquely do.
Do you have a sense of a timeline to clean this up?
Yeah, yesterday.
Okay. Before you go, a couple of other things. Have you seen John or heard about John Tamahere's interview with Moana Maniapoto? He claims he takes no responsibility for the loss of whānau order contracts or conflicts of interest. I've got a quick clip here. It's only a few seconds long. I'll play it and get your reaction. Here we go.
Sooner or later, Mr. Luxon, Mr. Peters, and Mr. Seymour will get the message that this is our whenua, that we're the tangata whenua, and unless we do wrong, we're allowed to trade the way we trade.
So you don't take any responsibility?
What is it? Show me what my responsibility is. Bow my head, get out of the Pāti Māori, don't be political, and become a slave.
And become a slave, Winston, become a slave.
Oh, look, this is unbelievable. But remember, I said to him, listen, Tamahere, you've declared war on us and we're not going to take it anymore. I reminded him that you were told never to try and practice law. They'd let you go and get your law degree, but never ever apply to practice law because the first thing you got guilty of was forging and uttering. These are serious offences. Now we've got the charities law that's been breached, and what on earth is going on with the institutions? What's going on with the Electoral Commission? What's going on with the police? This is evidence time after time after time, and every time someone calls him to account, he shouts, it's racism. That is his number one total answer, that all these accusations that he's innocent, pure as a driven snow, and it's just pure racism. This is a person that ran for the right in the Auckland Mayoralty. See what a chameleon we're talking about now?
Hard to explain then, is it? Because you can hear the bitterness in his voice.
Of course, this is the level of entitlement. And it's all based on something that his son-in-law said in Parliament as well. They got the blood quantum. They're unique. They got something that's more unique than everybody else. You know, I got more Maori in me than they have, but not them. Anybody that disagrees with them is a potato. And they're so dumb, they don't realise the Maori potato is not white on the inside, brown on the outside and white on the inside. It's dark and purple on the inside. That's their level of ignorance.
To the sacking, would you call it a sacking, of Phil Goff after comments as High Commissioner in London? Chris Seed is the acting High Commissioner, and the Prime Minister has expressed full support for him. He seems to have shifted maybe a little because I think he was more supportive of Goff early on. What prompted his shift, do you think? Just realpolitik?
Oh, no. We notified the Prime Minister after we did it. After we'd, sadly, he had to say to Phil Goff, this is it. We cannot stand this. You cannot be talking like a politician or, dare I say, a political science lecturer when you're the ambassador or high commissioner for a country. And we've noticed that the support for what my stance was in the way that the foreign minister of Finland, who was receiving this question, would not answer it. She knew instantly that this is how dangerous this was because you're talking about another country's politics. And we do not interfere with the politics of another country unless there's some constitutional right to.
So another example of Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, look, but I was saddened by because I've known Phil. We worked together. We were in the same government. He was trade minister, I was foreign minister. And I'd been over there last year when I went to the UK and on to France and on to Germany. And, I thought he was doing a fine job. And I thought, what on earth beset you to leave us in a situation when we had no other alternative?
Also, you've been travelling, and I saw a picture of you with a horse in Mongolia somewhere. They obviously knew you were the Minister of Racing or something. Can you give us just a quick few seconds on what that trip was about and what happened?
Well, first of all, I was stunned to go to this country that, we should know about, but it was such an ancient, huge international profile because of Genghis Khan, and it's from the plains there that he came. But to see them in this capital, Ulaanbaatar, going gangbusters with their development. And, it's a signal message to New Zealand. What's wrong with this? They are going flat to the boards and picking up their economy, growing as hard as they can. But of course, I did want to pay respect to their culture, and I went out to see this serious trainer. He's got 600 sheep and 300 horses. This is a pretty big owner, ranch style, say Mongolian versus Texas. But there he was, and he's got all these prizes for winning all these races. Their horses have enormous stamina. Their races are sometimes up to 25 kilometres. And he's got this magnificent horse as a present for me. And I think I was overwhelmed by it, frankly, because of all the horses around there, he was the finest specimen by miles. They said, but you've got to give him a name. And so I looked and thought to myself, I think I'll call him Stamina.
And will he eventually arrive here, or is that
it's a gift that they promise to look after the horse for the rest of his life, and he will live a total and full life and die a natural death. That's the promise. But there are other things that might happen, but that's a long way away from us. And of course, I've got the usual trolls who say, that should belong to the taxpayer, not yours, just on behalf of the country, and all the things. And they don't bring it home, and as a taxpayer paying for it. I cannot believe the number of mean turkeys out there, and let me tell you why I'm pretty angry about it, because I spend more money than on serious legal cases to do with this country's history, going back to the wine box and a whole lot of other things, and they've had hot dinners. But you still get the nasty trolls, and they need to be stopped in their tracks. Beautiful horse, great present.
Yeah, Stamina. We'll remember the name. And just to finish up, you're off, I think, pretty soon after this chat to overseas again, and I see you're going to New York and other places. And maybe it's for another day to chat about specifics. But what's the aim of that, given that we now know that Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire if they can get over the line with the Russians? So there does seem to be some movement in that direction. We've talked about this many times before. So what will you be doing?
Well, you've got a very explosive last 24 hours. First of all, there's been the drone attack by Ukraine on Moscow. That's been a massive surprise for many of the...
Okay, well, you're telling me for the first time. I hadn't caught up with that.
Yes, overnight. And then, of course, you got the breakout of the negotiations with the US delegate and Rubio, where they've agreed to a 1-month ceasefire. Has to be agreed to by Russia. We'll know about it in the next few hours, I think, but it's at least looks like progress. And so we're off to make a connection with the new administration. I spoke to Rubio very early in his time as Secretary of State, but we've got a lot of work to do and to make sure that our country's long-term interests are protected.
Especially with the Chinese live firing, thanks to the Jetstar pilot, we knew.
Well, but wasn't that astonishing? No warning to the Australians, no warning to New Zealand. And we're meant to be in a special relationship with China. I did raise that with Wang Yi when I was there in Beijing. How could this possibly be when we're meant to have a friendship pact?
And what did he say?
Well, he didn't really answer the question, because I said to him, you would expect at the very least that you would have warned us that you were going to begin firing these armaments in the Tasman Sea. But at least we registered our complaint.
But we've got, we'll wind it up in just a sec, but we spent a lot of money on those P8 Poseidons. The Australians have got them as well. We should have known that was kind of happening, shouldn't we have? Not relying on a low-cost carrier pilot.
I reminded him, I said, look, last year I was in French Polynesia, in Tahiti, when we discovered on the very outskirts of French Polynesia, you'd fire this missile across the Pacific. Now, Mr. Wang Yi, why didn't you point it to the west instead of the east? And you didn't notify nearly all the Pacific nations. And so what's going on? So, there's a chance to, even when you've got a relationship, to say when you disagree.
All right. Good to catch up with you. Have a successful trip, and maybe we can have a chat about that when you get back. Thank you, Winston.
I look forward to it. Thanks very much.